Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic. Welcome to another episode of Buha's Block. On today's episode, we're going to be doing something that we have not done before. We're going to be doing a mailbag with a guest, and I cannot think of anyone better to have on for this trial run than Anthony Irwin, host of Lakers Lounge and senior Lakers insider for Clutch Points. Anthony, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to this. These I really enjoy mailbag episodes. They're my favorite thing, my favorite episode to do because engages the crowd and they feel like they're a part of it. And they often come up with topics that I just hadn't previously considered. So I'm really looking forward to this one.
I'm excited because right now we are in the doldrums of the offseason, the calm before the storm of the draft and free agency and all of the madness. We're being promised the craziest offseason of all time, or one of them. So before the craziness starts in the next couple of weeks, I think the audience can give us some things to talk about here. So let's just get into it. First question is actually two similar questions, so I'm just going to read them both. First one from @YoungClaire. What is the most realistic offseason, free agency, draft, and trade-wise? And then the second one is from @JConnect_official. What's the most realistic outcome for us this offseason? So basically, what is the most realistic thing for the Lakers this summer? What say you, Anthony?
Pain. No, I think.
Wow. We're off to a great start here.
Every time I get that question, it's my favorite response, almost no matter what's going on. But no, I think the Lakers have enough stuff to work with to upgrade their center spot and add some additional depth to the center spot. I think it would be wise for them to use their taxpayer mid-level on a backup center, even after trading for a center. And then outside of that, I think the biggest thing that fans should honestly be looking for is improvement from Luka, LeBron, and Austin. If they're all still on the Lakers, obviously, most specifically Austin. But if those guys are all three on the Lakers still, I think no matter how the personnel goes this summer, the most important factor this offseason is going to be the extent to which LeBron, Austin, and Luka learn to play together better than they did last year. It was a lot of your turn, my turn, your turn stuff. And if they can move away from that and start to compound each other's strengths, that's when the Lakers, I think, can really take the next step forward.
So are you suggesting they go on like a vacation together?
Yeah.
We're talking like a Cabo trip, or
I think Airbnb.
How do you see that working out?
I would a few make sure that LeBron's the oldest guy, so he probably gets the main bedroom, right?
Okay.
Did you see? My gosh, there was a new movie on HBO where it's all these billionaires who all get together on the mountaintop or something. Mountainhead was what it was called.
Okay. I haven't seen it yet. I want to check it out.
It's the darkest thing I've ever seen, but it was funny to see the person who owns the house gave his master bedroom to the richest person in the world. So it'd be funny to see if Austin arranged the Airbnb, if he would give up the master to LeBron.
I think he would.
Or Luka. I think so.
Austin's a team player.
I think so.
I'm going to make some predictions here. I'm just going to go for it with my notes for this question. So I think the most realistic thing this offseason is LeBron opts in, but if not, opts out, signs a 1+1 or maybe just a 1-year deal, but some form of that, of LeBron being a Laker for another year. Luka signs a 3-year extension on August 2nd or thereabouts to allow him to opt out after his 10th season, to sign that 35% max and help make up some of the money that he missed out by not staying in Dallas. LA uses the 5.7 tax mid-level exception, and then they trade at least 3 of Rui, Gabe, Dalton, and Maxi Kleba, and then not sure about the inclusion of a potential first-round pick. So I think but those are their four, I think, primary tradable player assets with expiring contracts and Dalton still on a rookie deal. So I think they trade at least three of those four players. And again, I think the first will come down to the opportunity cost that's out there and the types of guys they could get back.
I just wrote about LeBron's player option yesterday, and I'm with you. The majority of the noise that is out there is indicating that he is likely to opt in to his player option. I was kind of curious, so I asked around about why, because the decision doesn't make too much sense to me. If he can secure an extra year of max money while he's preparing to potentially buy a team after he is done playing, $60 million would not be the worst thing to help him get there. So I was kind of wondering why he would opt in. And the two kind of pervasive theories were, one, that if he opts in, the indication would be that he's considering retirement because this allows him to just have the nice clean cut at the end of the season. And if he signs a 1+1, the second year of that contract, if he wants to retire, would be calling to him like the Green Goblin mask. And the other one was legitimate curiosity out there that if he opts out, would he get the same deal that he has with the Lakers now, where it would be a full max with that full no trade clause? Would the Lakers still offer that up? So I asked around about that, and then I asked some of the people that I talked to with the Lakers, and they were saying that that's not really how they've treated any core superstar ever. So indications are that they would probably meet LeBron's demands, whatever they would be. So it's going to be interesting. I'm with you. The majority of the noise is that he is going to opt in. But in the back of my mind, I do think there's a real possibility here that he opts out and signs that 1-1, and also talks to the Lakers about, if they need a little bit of help getting a slightly further below the first apron to have more flexibility on a trade or something like that. We're talking about a very small haircut, not the 8-figure discount that some people had lined up for him. But that decision, I think, is going to go a long way in deciding what the Lakers are able to do this summer.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think for LeBron, he's got to figure out how much longer he wants to play, right? And I think that's just the biggest thing that is still on the docket for him this summer. And he doesn't have to make that decision now necessarily, but I do anticipate that whenever he decides to retire, we will get that heads up and he will have the retirement tour that he deserves. So, I think to your point, if he does opt in and there is no extension or no opting out with the 1+1, then it seems like him potentially retiring, and maybe we get that announcement or something in September that he's gonna, this is his final season. It's poetic. Year 23, number 23, first player to play 23 seasons. Like it would make some sense. The dude's about to be 41. Let's get into the next one from Jesse. What is the most likely center the Lakers will land via free agency or trade?
Probably Claxton, I would probably say. The Lakers have a history of working with Brooklyn on a deal just as recently as last summer when they got Dorian Finney-Smith. And we know that Rob does kind of like to work with the same executives around the league. I know that there has been a lot more noise recently with about Walker Kessler, and I know Lakers fans are really kind of interested in how that goes. I think he's the subject of a question a little bit later too, so I can save some of the points then. But I don't know. I think the cards kind of align really easily with Claxton, and he's more of a stretch big than some of the other trade candidates out there. He's also a lob threat that fits with Luka. He's one of the switchier defenders of the guys that the Lakers can realistically go out and get. If I had to bet on a big that the Lakers are going to go and trade for, I would say probably Claxton.
He's one of my two answers. So I think the most likely is Clint Capella. And
Oh,
the reason
well, okay.
I say, well, I know people don't want to hear that, but I think the reason I would pick Clint Capella is because among the higher level center options, which I maybe being generous here, looking at the free agent class, I think he's the most likely to leave as things stand now because he was replaced in Atlanta by a Kongwu and moved to the bench, and I think that just seems like a situation where he's likely to move on to somewhere else, be it as a starter or a high level bench center. So I think looking at like a Brook Lopez, that is partly tied to what happens with Giannis. I think a Steven Adams, he was a really effective backup center for them. So especially if the money is potentially going to be similar, maybe he ends up staying there. So I think looking at those are the two guys that I think are in competition with him as like the top free agent centers. And I think among those three, Clint Capella is the most likely to leave. So I would peg the Lakers as heavily in that mix to potentially get him. Now, to your point, I think Claxton is the most likely trade guy.
Yeah, that's more
and that he's my top target. I've been saying that for weeks. Like I also think that there's something to he had a down year last year by his standards, and I wonder if that can even play into the Lakers' favor in terms of negotiations. I think the cost for Claxton a year ago would be higher than it currently is based on the season that he just had. But he is a vertical lob threat, a really good rim runner, and pick and roll big. Also a switchable defender who you are fine with switching onto guards. I think he's actually a better post defender than people give him credit for because of his frame, and people just look at the 215 pounds, but I think he's a better post defender. He has got really good length, athleticism, timing, really good rebounder on both sides of the ball. So he checks most, if not all of the boxes you would want for a Luka big. He's also only 26 years old. He's got a descending contract. So I'd be interested to know what that final price would be. If I'm the Lakers, I fight to not put, if I'm putting the first in, I'm fighting to keep Dalton out. If I'm putting Dalton in, I'm fighting to keep the first out. I would like to not give up both for Claxton.
Yeah.
But I think to me, like outside of Gafford, I think there's a real teardrop among the realistic center options. Like sure, if they could go get Kessler, they could go get Jalen Duren. If they could go get a Kongwu, some of these guys, I think they're in the mix as well. And some of them I'd have ahead of Claxton. Kessler, I would for sure have ahead of Claxton. But I don't think those guys are realistic. I don't think the Lakers have enough to get them. Or those guys just aren't. Like Atlanta could be feisty next season. There's no reason to give up a Kongwu. They just promoted him to be a starting center. I don't see why they're all of a sudden, like the report came out that the Lakers were interested, but just because the Lakers were interested in a player doesn't mean that that team wants to trade that player. So I think among the realistic guys, it's Claxton and Gafford, and then there's a notable teardrop in my opinion.
Yeah, the Gafford one is an interesting one. I'm always I always get a little nervous depending on how fans of their current team talk about that player, where I think Lakers fans in general are a lot higher on Gafford than Mavericks fans are. And that always gives me a little bit of pause. Claxton, you could probably say something similar, but I really think the situation there was really kind of tough where they clearly weren't really trying for the playoffs, but they also played some good basketball at points in the season. So yeah, I think I would prefer Claxton pretty clearly over Gafford. And if you can get Claxton without giving up that either 31 or 32 first rounder, then I think that's a no-brainer. And I given the way that he did have a bit of a step back last year, I think it's possible that you can do it. I would probably look to center the trade around Rui so as to keep my draft powder dry and balance out a front court, which is mostly consistent of players who guard the four. So that way, if you include Rui, maybe you can hold on to Dalton and the 31 pick because you're sending over a player who, they aren't really interested in guys who help now, but I think Rui could on his own probably fetch a first rounder from another contending team. And I've seen a lot of reporting and a lot of talk out there of most of these deals probably being 3-team deals anyway. So maybe Rui goes to more of a contender. That contender sends more draft capital towards Brooklyn. The Lakers wind up with Claxton, some kind of a deal along those lines.
Well, you're leading me into question number 3. So we got a question here from Seath18. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Claxton for Knecht and expirings is looking like the most realistic outcome. How would you build around the roster after it? We still have Rui's contract, the taxpayer MLE, and vet minimums.
Yeah,
Well, so the one thing for me in this hypothetical that I'm not quite sure of is if the Lakers are including their first or not, because he doesn't mention it in the package, but he also doesn't mention it as a remaining asset for them to trade. So I'm a little confused. I'm guessing he's putting the first in. So it would be something like Dalton, the first, and expirings, maybe Kleba, Gabe, Dalton, and the first for Claxton, and then you keep Rui. You still have the PMLE. That's hard to say. And then the vet minimums. How would you feel about that?
It would be fine.
I think
it's an overpay. I think it's an overpay for Claxton. I like I said, I really think there's a world in which if you center the trade around Rui, that makes the most sense because the Lakers do need to add foot speed in one way or another. And I like Rui. I thought he had a really good season last year, and he is improved in every step of the way, basically, while he's been a Laker under some kind of tougher circumstances too, right? Where Darvin Ham didn't necessarily believe in him, and then he did, but Rui kind of stuck with it, and I thought really improved. So credit to him for doing so. But the fact still remains: you have Dorian, who is not going anywhere one way or another, whether he opts into his player option or I think another likely scenario here is where he opts out with the intent to sign a 2-year deal for less money per year than the 1 year that he's currently signed for, or what he would be opting in. You have LeBron, who is going to be back in one way or another, and you have Luka, who is clearly not going anywhere. And it's just difficult when you have so much money allocated to defending one position. And I think that's where a lot of the problems that the Lakers had this season kind of stemmed from, was that imbalance on the roster. So bringing in, moving Rui for somebody who balances out the front court, and then keeping that 31 pick, and ideally Dalton to be able to turn into more foot speed, especially defensively on the perimeter. That would be kind of the path that I would prefer to see the Lakers go down. What are you getting the sense of as far as Dalton's value on the market? Because it's been kind of hard for me to hammer that down.
I would agree with that. I think it's certainly taken a hit since last season at where it was at the trade deadline, where it was earlier in the season. At the time, or like early in the season when he had that 37-point game against Utah, and he had that stretch there of like 9-10 games where he was just shooting the shit out of the ball.
He's like Kyle Korver, who could dunk. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, but I would see her like, is he worth like 2 first-round picks? Like there was because remember that I think there had been a lot of anticipation and excitement for Dalton with the Lakers dating back to the draft, where this was a guy who several notable mock drafts had him as high as number 6 on draft night going into their final mock. He goes obviously to the Lakers at 17, and there's this, we got the JJ's drawing up plays for him on the whiteboard, and JJ is sort of the player archetype for Dalton in some regards, and you just feel like playing next to AD, playing next to LeBron, playing next to Austin, D'Lo, like he's going to be this ultimate role-playing shooter as a rookie, and he flashed that early, and then it went away. And then I think some of his flaws were on display for people to pick at. So I think based on him, just the way that the season ended, him not being able to crack the playoff rotation, also factoring in he's already 24. I don't know quite where his value is. I still think there are people around the league who see potential in him and see him to have that skill set that it's hard to find of a player who can shoot the ball like that, go on hot streaks like that. But I like kind of a first, I guess.
Yeah.
First. But,
Like a
but
first
I don't
you
think it's like
round
a.
up to.
I don't think it's a good. I don't think it's like a good first.
Yeah.
I think it's more like a mid to late level first.
Yeah, I think it's one of those firsts that it's technically a first, but then you look a little closer at it and it's like top 27 protected. It's just, and look, I do think there's a world in which Dalton really takes a step forward in his second year. I thought it was really clear last year. Like, have you ever watched somebody learn how to dance? And
no,
well,
but sorry, I can't help you here.
Well, what you'll see is like you can watch them counting the steps in their head, or you can actually see them go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, all of that stuff. And I feel like at various points in the season last year, you could actually see Dalton, the thought bubble above his head, which was, do I do this? Do I do this? And that hesitation, that consistent hesitation, was leading to some frustration, whether it was from JJ or from his teammates or whatever, about not being in necessarily the right spot. And most notably, right, JJ calls a timeout, yells at Dalton, "That's your bleeping play." And I think that's where with JJ, he doesn't have, I think, a ton of time for that kind of mistake. And I think it's going to, and also there was some frustration with Dalton's streaky shooting. So it was like, yeah, we knew we were signing up for some defensive warts. We knew that there were questions about his basketball IQ. What you can't have on top of it is him going from what JJ considered a 99th percentile shooter to a streaky one. And that's where, maybe the getting a few more reps, being around the game and playing at that speed a lot, for an extra year, maybe that makes him better. But I don't think the Lakers have a ton of time to sit around and wait for him to figure it out.
And that's been my point with potentially trading Dalton, because I get the counter argument to the Lakers mishandling, let's say, some of their recent draft picks.
Yeah.
And it just some of the young talent that they've had, and whether it's misevaluating it or those guys going on to other situations and having more success. So I get why some people would have a certain level of patience or grace with Dalton. It's also tough to play for the Lakers and be under that spotlight. And he's getting a certain level of attention that the typical rookie, the typical mid first round pick isn't necessarily getting. At the same time, I think there are some real concerns with the defensive end. I talked about this before, but there was a stat. I really want to find it just because I keep referencing this and I don't remember where I saw it, but there was a stat where among all, and this was, I believe in March, among all rookies since the tracking era, which is 96, 97, he was in the 11th percentile defensively. So I think there is a narrative out there, and it's a correct narrative, that rookies tend to be worse defensively. It tends to be more of a learning curve, and they can improve. But even among rookies, Dalton was a bottom 10th-ish percentile rookie, which is pretty bad. So it's like, even for rookie standards, and there are several advanced, looking at EPM, he was the 5th worst defender out of like 500 something defenders. Several defensive tracking things were like, he's a bottom 1% defender in the league. And I don't think he's like that bad necessarily, but I don't think it's that far off either. So I think like him going from like being a bottom 5% defender to like a bottom 25%, that's a pretty notable jump, and that's not guaranteed, but it's a jump he's going to have to make. So I think he's going to need to get much better on the defensive end. And then also, to your point, remember plays offensively and be, I think, a little less streaky with his shooting, because I think a lot, like, it felt like he had several big performances that carried some of his shooting numbers. The other thing with him was, I don't know if you saw this, like I started getting aggregated for saying that I think at next season he would be at best the 8th man on the team, and I don't find that like controversial.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm crazy, but like he was not, he was the 10th man, I guess, on last year's team theoretically the Lakers should have a deeper team. That should be a goal for them. So saying a guy who was like 10th in the depth chart or rotation going up to 8th with a deeper roster, like I think that would be a win for the Lakers if Dalton can crack the top 8 next year.
Yeah, I on a team where Austin is probably going to be playing a ton of minutes at the 2 spot, maybe you're saying Dalton is more of a 3, which, okay, they don't have too many guys there, but I would imagine Vanderbilt is, I knock on wood, but I think Vanderbilt is going to be playing more next year than he did last year, as he's finally going into an offseason healthy. So I would probably anticipate Vanderbilt being ahead of Dalton on the roster, and all you need is 1 or 2 more guys to be ahead of him there. The backup center, whoever they bring in. If
DFS is coming off the bench, it's already like DFS, Vando.
That's 8.
You're at Dalton at 8.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, I think similar to Rui, he's sort of a roster casualty potentially, just because if you are going with the Luka, LeBron, Austin trio, those are your pillars. Those are the foundation of what you're trying to build. The other guys all have to be able to defend. It just is what it is. Like there are no exceptions. And especially thinking about Luka, Austin, and Dalton together, offensively, I can see the fit. I can see the vision. I think it could be great, especially against some second units. But defensively, I don't know that that's like a serious trio you can put together against real teams. And that's my biggest pushback with the people that wanted Dalton to play in the playoffs is like, I just think like what team with the Lakers aspirations has a defender of Dalton's caliber in the rotation? There is none. There just is none. So I like that's it needs to get better on the defensive end. That's just it.
Yeah, I posed the theory last night towards the end of the show with Raj, talking about how we used to, growing up, there were the microwave type shooters where you threw them in and they played 5 or so minutes, and if they knocked down a couple shots, awesome. And then you took them out before they did too much damage to you defensively. I think now you actually have microwave defenders who you go out there and you get a few stops, and it doesn't, you take them out before they gum up your offense too much. And maybe they have the energy to really bother the other team's best perimeter player, right? We have seen the impact that having wave after wave after wave after wave of physical, long, high motor defenders has had on Shea in this series. That's the first time I've ever seen him look tired as he did last night. And I really kind of wonder
Game 3
if
of the finals for reference.
I wonder if we're kind of seeing the end of that kind of archetype of player as teams maybe start to prioritize defense, as it's more consistent. You can bank on defense more consistently than you can a streaky shooter.
Let's move on to the next one from @JamesSmith. What type of player would it take for you to bite on an AR trade?
Man, all right. Well, I would say, I know there's a lot of talk of all-star or future all-star or current all-star, all of that stuff. To me, I would probably set my bar at star in their role, right? Somebody who, a role that the Lakers really need primarily, which is, a more athletic, again, high motor, foot speed type defender who, because we're in this another golden age of point guards. You saw the final 4 teams in the conference finals. Ant is not a point guard, but he's a perimeter-oriented scorer. You have Jalen Brunson.
Superstar ball handler.
Yeah, you have Tyrese Halliburton. You have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Those guys aren't going anywhere, and the Lakers don't have anybody to guard them right now. So I would, if I could turn Austin into somebody who I can just write in ink in a permanent marker, here's 30 minutes that I'm comfortable that this person is going to go up against the other team's best perimeter player. That would be kind of like the absolute, and also obviously not gum up the offense, because you could say that about Vanderbilt, but he also screws up the offense too much. So you can't really put him out there for 30 minutes. So if you can find,
I would not trade Austin for Jared Vanderbilt, for the record.
Go ahead, NBA Central, Dunk Central. You can run with that one. But like if you go that would be like my lowest tier basement expectation for whoever you trade Austin for. If they can't check that box, I'm not interested at all.
So I made a list.
All right.
And I checked it twice. And I'll throw some names at you. So I think first, of course, like a no-brainer superstar like Giannis. If Giannis demands out of Milwaukee and says that he wants to come to LA and Austin has to be part of that package, you have to do it. And now you have Giannis and Luka for the next half decade as one of the best duos of all time, frankly, just based on where both guys are at in their respective careers. Beyond that, I think the guys that I would consider for Austin have to fit a certain criteria of, for me, we're talking top 50-ish, maybe top 60 at the lowest, but ideally top 50-ish players who are under 30, who have either multiple years left on their current contracts, or you have some confidence that you could retain if they are impending free agents soon. And I think there has to be a level of covering up for some of Luka's weaknesses or just areas that aren't his strengths, and particularly on the defensive end. So I'm looking for essentially young players, under 30, top 50-ish, good defensively. So a list of names that I think a lot of these are obvious, but I'm just stating them. Evan Mobley, Jalen Williams. Jaylen Brown is an interesting one because, like, in theory, it's a no-brainer, but when you factor in the contract, it's like, I don't really love his contract, but I do think he'd be a really good fit with Luka. Paolo, Triple J, Chet, Jalen Johnson is maybe a little bit more of a controversial one, but I really like him. He's 23. I think he's going to be a future All-Star.
Yep.
And then Bam, I don't love the contract or the fit with Luka, but I would strongly consider that one. And then I think some of the more interesting and arguable ones, just based on how good you think these players are, their contracts, them compared to Austin, all that stuff. Trey Murphy, Lauri Markkanen, OG Anunoby, Franz Wagner, Ivica Zubac, and Mikal Bridges. I think some of those guys, I think I would for sure. Some of them I think are more borderline, but I think every player I just named is either a big or a big wing that could defend multiple positions. And I think that there's less duplication there compared to Austin and Luka.
The other thing too, Jaylen Brown just had that surgery where they remove a part of the meniscus.
And Jaylen Brown, the more I thought about that one, I think he might just be a no because of the contract and that surgery that he just had. And
I wish teams would stop letting their guys get that surgery. It ended Brandon Roy's career. It seems to have derailed Joel Embiid's career to this point. Every time I hear about that, it's just like, I know you're talking about a longer recover period, but if you're the Boston Celtics, you're going to stink next year anyway. Jason Tatum is going to be out the whole year. So you may as well just let Jaylen Brown also recover and get yourself a high draft pick. But anyway, Brown, if he didn't have the surgery, the contract, I'm really not that worried about because I think he would be a superstar next to Luka. Like, that's such a great, perfect combination there if he's healthy. But I especially given that Brown has also already had so much success playing alongside Tatum, another ball dominant wing, or another guy who has the ball a little bit more than he does. So I like Jaylen Brown. The Jalen Johnson one is a really interesting. I hadn't really thought about him all that much. He was going to be an all-star last year before he got hurt. He was having a phenomenal year in Atlanta. So that's a fun one. Mikal Bridges.
I think I wouldn't. That's one I think I wouldn't.
Yeah, that's a tough one because I think you could
like
probably
Bridges and Markkanen. I think of that group I listed are the two where I'm like, I get this. Like, Markkanen is just a weird player defensively. I'm not quite sure
what he's best at.
Yeah, how you want to use him defensively on a contender.
Yeah, but I think I I guess the point of the exercise, though, is you do have to be extremely choosy if you trade Austin, and the Lakers are going to be. I don't think he's necessarily off of the table in ways that he has been kind of discussed, to this point. But if you're calling the Lakers and you're asking for Austin Reaves, you'd better be offering a top 2 player on your roster. And whether Austin is a part of a package that lands somebody who's making more money or whatever. But trading Austin is going to take a lot, and it's really tricky because whoever trades for him, he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year.
Yeah.
He's going to opt out, and if you're that team, are you going to give up a top 2 or 3 player on your team or in your organization for a guy who might peace out the following summer anyway?
Yeah, and I think that's a real leveraging advantage that he and his agents have.
Yeah.
Because we know how these things work. There'll be some backroom conversations of, if we trade for Austin, would you want to, would you consider resigning? Would you want to stay? What's your approach? And all he has to say is, I'm going to test free agency if I get traded. And that can scare off some potential suitors. But I think my takeaway from this thing is, like, again, Austin's not untouchable. That there are certain players or scenarios in which I would consider trading him. I just think I listed, for the most part, all top. Like, I went through the Ringers top 100 just to look at their list. I didn't agree with all of it, especially in the middle part. But, like, most of these guys were in their top 50, if not. I think everyone was in the top 60, and I was just like, okay, well, all these guys are around the same age as Austin. Some of them are younger, some of them a little bit older, but they're all on, like, reasonable deals for the most part. They're all better defensively for the most part. And I think, like, again, if you're trading him, it needs to be a certain caliber of player. And I would say most of the trades we see Austin thrown in for are not this caliber of player. Like, I've seen some Trey Murphy, I've seen some Bridges, I've seen Triple J and Bam. I don't see those teams giving them up for just Austin or Austin is the primary guy. And then I guess Markkanen now, maybe with the Jazz potentially having a fire sale as someone that, but I don't think I would do it for Markkanen, to be honest. Personally,
the Triple J one, had he been eligible for his, the super duper max that he could have gotten if he would have made an All NBA team, I actually think that would have increased the odds that the Lakers could have traded for him, because
that's a good point.
I don't know if I'm Memphis, I want Triple J on that.
I don't know what Memphis is doing. That's like its own podcast. Is I don't know what Memphis is doing. They're in a weird.
That would be
like,
that would be a
if they
fun
just run it
podcast
back,
where
they're
we
probably
just,
what
list teams like, what are the Chicago Bulls doing? I don't know.
Well, that you could do a whole 30 for 30 on that one. The post Jordan Bulls, but I mean, like, Memphis, because I just did a West rankings. I don't know if you saw that, but I had Memphis at 8, and I'm like, they were the 8 seed last year. I think as things stand, they're the 8th best team in the West, and if they just run it back, or even make like a couple of tweets, and now you got the Edey injury and how that is going to factor into potentially the start of the season, but I mean, they're just looking like first round fodder for likely OKC again and another sweep, or maybe they push it to a gentleman's sweep next year. But it's like, I don't know what they're doing, and it's crazy how quickly the floor fell out from under them.
That's this.
They were the team. They were supposed to be OKC, right? Yeah. Like they were supposed. I mean, maybe not. They were never set up to that extent, but like they were supposed to be the young team of the future in the West 3 years ago, and now look where they are.
Yeah. I think they kind of sort of have to break up their core, whether it's Bane, Ja, or Jaren Jackson Jr. One of those guys got to go.
All right, next question here from F. Pendleton 1922. I will say this is one of my favorite mailbag questions I've ever gotten, because there's a lot of creativity with this one. But based on what you've been hearing, or what you were hearing before the Luka trade, what do you think would have been our moves at the deadline if the Luka trade didn't happen? What would be the likeliest playoff rotation? Just for fun, I love the Luka trade. So let's go back in time and say that Nico Harrison has critical thinking skills. and decides, let me at least let's expand this circle here of people I'm talking to about this deal, and let's maybe not do this trade, or demand Austin and Dalton and the other pick and see how the Lakers respond to that. But let's go back and say Dallas and the Lakers do not do this trade. What do you think happens for the Lakers over that final week leading into the trade deadline?
I think they trade Dalton, a first and a swap for Mark Williams. And then no.
I wrote that down. I think
really.
Yeah, I think they end up doing the Mark Williams trade again and rescinding it again. Maybe they don't rescind it.
Sorry, AD, we tried.
I actually have it. So I have I have them trading for a center. Not quite sure who, but I tentatively put down Mark Williams. Like, there's no reason why you couldn't have done the trade again.
Yeah,
and then maybe
there was Gafford noise. Like there was some, there was.
I'm glad you said that because I wrote that down. I wrote that. So I could say this, and we might get aggregated on this if you want to add anything into it. But so I know Shams has danced around this topic a little bit where he's shared when he's talked about the Luka trade that he was hearing in the days leading into it that there was some Lakers Mavericks buzz. And I had not heard that at the time. But since then, and now always after a trade, people will open up and share things. Yeah. But with some of the people I've talked to since then, there has been around the league, there was some chatter, a little bit of buzz of the Lakers and Mavericks working on something. No one thought it was Luka AD. And people thought it was Daniel Gafford to the Lakers to give them finally that starting level center that AD wanted next to him, and to slide AD to the 4. Then it would have been a starting lineup of Gafford, AD, and LeBron. And that's what people thought those two teams were working on. And then it ended up being, of course, the Luka AD trade. So that's one that is interesting. That I think the Lakers probably would have traded for a center, and then you move Rui to the bench, and now your bench is Rui, DFS, Gabe, and Vando. That's probably your 9-man rotation. And in this hypothetical, I don't know if Jordan Goodwin ever pops. I don't know if he ends up making the roster, because that was in part due to, at the time, the Luka trade and opening up some minutes. And because Luka was out at first, and that's when Jordan Goodwin flashed what he could do. Also, Jackson Hayes' stint as the starting center is short-lived in this alternate universe. So I think it would have been interesting. I will say, with AD and his injury and what he was dealing with the abdominal situation, I think the Lakers might end up being a play-in team in this case and might not even make the playoffs. So there's no guarantee that they even make the playoffs with how things played out with AD's abdomen.
That was another point that I was going to make, is that we might have had one of those trade deadlines that we just kind of like scratch our heads about. You know, maybe Dorian is their big trade deadline acquisition, and they wait for AD to get healthy. It needs to be said also, they were playing really good basketball before the Luka trade.
They were.
They had Max Christie. I thought the season really turned around when they swapped out D'Angelo Russell for Max Christie. And then on top of that, they traded for Dorian Finney-Smith. And I thought they were slowly but surely turning into that bigger, stronger, faster team. Maybe not necessarily faster, but certainly bigger and stronger. And I like that iteration of the Lakers. It's a great what if to wonder what that team was kind of capable of if they got the runway of the rest of the regular season, especially with an additional piece here and there. At the very least, even if they don't trade for a starting caliber center, I think there's a good chance that they trade for a Jackson Hayes upgrade, and they would have stopped waiting for Christian Wood to finally get healthy. And so,
remember that.
What a time. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's a fun hypothetical. I think they probably are a little bit better equipped to deal with the postseason than they were post Luka trade. I'm not saying that I wouldn't make the Luka trade. I just think that was a more balanced out roster that they had at the time, especially if you upgrade from Jackson. And I think that team has a decent chance at beating Minnesota. I think they probably lose fairly handily though to OKC the next round.
I just pulled up AD's game logs, and
to the Warriors,
he played. Yeah, so AD played 9 games the rest of the way with Dallas, and that was partly him rushing back to make his debut around the same time that Luka made his debut, because there was so much noise and noise is being kind. There was so much backlash and criticism, and it was like, I think AD, I mean, you saw that first half he had against Houston was incredible, and he was dominating them, and he was hyping up the crowd, and it was like this moment that was happening, and then he aggravates the abdomen injury. And I think if he's a Laker, there isn't that urgency to run. Like, there's always this level of urgency to come back from an injury. I'm not saying that's not there, but I think he arguably like pushed himself through something he shouldn't have pushed himself through, and made it worse by trying to show Dallas, like, I'm gonna be like, it's gonna be okay. I'm gonna be the savior here. Like, don't worry about it. And he ended up playing only 8 games after that. So maybe there's a scenario in which he takes his time, is out another couple weeks, comes back in late February, and is able to play the rest of the way, and the Lakers are able to find their footing, and they're like the 6th seed or something. But I don't think they're the 3 seed if they don't do the Luka trade. Like, I think Luka, because I've seen the backlash with how the season ended, with should we have done the Luka trade, and and Luka's not that good, and that it's like, no, the Lakers, because that stretch that they had coming up, I mean, how big was Luka in this stretch of at Denver, home Dallas, home Minnesota, the 2 home games against the Clippers, home versus New York, at Boston, at Milwaukee, and then at Milwaukee and Denver, LeBron's injured, so things go off the rails a bit. But like, Luka was instrumental in that stretch of some big wins against Denver, Minnesota, the Clippers, etc. So like, I think if they don't have AD, which they likely would not have had him, we're talking about likely a play-in team.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
It's interesting though. It's interesting to think about the alternative.
Yeah, to be absolutely clear, I'm not saying that like the team is worse because they traded for Luka. It's more a balance issue that they went into a playoffs with Jackson Hayes as their only center. Like, it's just you and I were really optimistic about that team at the time going into the postseason for a reason. We had seen some really good stuff. Unfortunately, the clock struck midnight, and Jackson Hayes turned back into a pumpkin.
Next question from at Sizeway Tech Flows Blos. Is Lonzo Ball still a possibility? What do you think of him and Time Lord as additions? I guess we're turning the injury sliders off in this simulation of 2K.
I would love to see a healthy Lonzo next to Luka. I can't think of, honestly, a better player to have as Luka's backcourt mate than Lonzo. Before he had the injuries that he sustained in Chicago, he turned into, I think he had the best shooting season of anybody that year in New Orleans, right? In terms of volume really and the rate that he was hitting threes at. He is a special defender, both in terms of on ball and as a team defender, great rebounder, and most importantly, he is one of the quickest decision makers in the league. He does that thing where as the ball is coming to him in the air, he takes a quick second to take a snapshot of the court and be ready to react as soon as he catches the ball. And that is such an important quality to have with Luka. So I threw out a trade the other night in which the Lakers sent Dalton an expiring and maybe the second, the number 55 pick that they have for Lonzo Ball, just because I really want to see that combination there. And if you keep Austin, then Lonzo's injury concerns aren't as kind of concerning. I would love it. But all that said, we know that the Lakers are super conscious of injury concerns, and it's why they didn't draft Cam Whitmore. It's why I don't think they would ever get in the business of trading for a Time Lord or even potentially. I wouldn't say never on Lonzo, but I do know that the Lakers are because they've been bitten by injuries so thoroughly in the past. If you have an injury history, the Lakers see that as a major red flag, maybe more so than most organizations.
I would say that with both of these guys, the Lakers have had interest in them. And I reported around the February trade deadline that both guys were guys I'd heard attached to the Lakers in various capacities. I will say, to your point, that the Lakers are injury averse. So I think the price that they're willing to pay for some of these guys is maybe going to be lower than, like, I think there's a gap there between the asking price and the price that the Lakers would be willing to pay. Robert Williams is actually, so I'm working on next week. I'm doing center rankings and then probably perimeter rankings. I'm going to combine the wings and guards because it's pretty dire in both groups there, at least in free agency. But going through the center rankings, I think I'm pretty high on Robert Williams relative to the rest of the crop. And of course, he'd be someone you'd have to trade for. But and there's the injury, like with both of these guys here, you can't state it enough, just the looming injuries. And these, like, you almost pencil these guys in for no more than like 50, 55 games. It's hard to have more confidence in them playing anything more than that. But with Robert Williams, he does check a lot of the boxes of what you would want next to Luka with his finishing. He's a lob threat, really good rebounder on both ends, really good rim protector. I have a table comparing, I think, like 12 center candidates, both in free agency and trade. And he fared very well against those guys in terms of his rim field goal percentage as a scorer, but also as a defender. His rebounds per 36 minutes, blocks per 36 minutes, like all the advanced metrics, Robert Williams rates out really well. So I think if we've talked about different paths the Lakers can take, if you could trade something light for a Robert Williams and make it either a Gabe or a Maxi Kleba as the primary salary, and then is it Maxi and Dalton, right? And I know that for some people, they're not going to want to see Dalton go, especially for a guy like Robert Williams, but he plugs in your starting center spot, at least for now. And then maybe you add a Clint Capella, a Steven Adams for that 5.7 taxpayer MLE, and that's the backup center. And now all of a sudden, if Robert Williams goes down for 20, 30 games, you could slot that guy in, and maybe you have actually a third center on the roster. I know it's a novel concept. Maybe you have Christian Coloco as your third string center. He could step in as the backup. And then you also have the small ball pitch, the centerless pitch that JJ went to so often last season. So I think, like, I would be okay with that price personally. I know for some that might be an overpay, but I would not want to give up a first for him. But if it's, especially if it's Maxi and it's not a rotation player and you can keep Gabe either to trade for something else or just as a backup guard, I think you're basically trading Dalton for Robert Williams, which, again, I can see the long-term risk for it. But for next season, who's the better player, who can provide more? I think it's clearly Robert Williams, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's tough with both of these guys. They are exactly what the Lakers need. There's just that daunting bright light disclaimer of their injury history. Robert Williams. The thing I also love about Robert Williams, you mentioned his rim protection. He is so physical. Like, people run into him and they get knocked off course, period. And that's something that the Lakers have really missed. Jackson Hayes is not that kind of a player. Christian Coloco isn't really that kind of a player. Even Anthony Davis isn't necessarily that kind of a player. Somebody who you hit and you feel it after you run into that person. So I also like the idea of, because if I'm being honest, and we talked about this, we were texting about this yesterday, there isn't really a center that I would be over the moon trading that 31 or 32 first rounder for. Claxton probably comes closest, but I would still like to see if they could get to a deal without including that for him. And if I'm not going to be moving a first rounder, trading for a buy low guy because of the injury concerns, and then also putting together a center rotation that makes up for the nights that you have to give him off to keep him healthy over the course of the year. That would be something that it would really intrigue me, especially if too, like, they have Dwop Reath as on the minimum there. And if you basically you send over Dalton and you get, just to fill out, whether you basically make a choice between Reath or Koloko as your kind of super duper, third string or maybe even fourth string centers, that would be something that I would be maybe a little interested in.
I have it here. Opponents. So he only played in 20 games, which is a giant red flag. Plant that in the ground. But among the 12 center targets I was looking at, his opponent shot 41% at the rim against him, which again, 20 games, not the biggest sample size, but the next best percentage was Daniel Gafford, allowing 48% at the rim. So 41 to 48%, that's a pretty big gap there. And again, 20 games. So you would think if he played 40 games, 60 games, it's going to be a little bit higher. But like Robert Williams is a legitimate, like, I don't want to say elite rim protector, but he's a really, really good rim protector. The issue is he's played 26 games over the past 2 seasons, and if you extend it out even to 3 seasons, he's played 61 games over the past 3 seasons. So you are taking some risk there, but at the same time, can I sell you on Luke Cornett? Can I sell you on Kevon Looney? Can I sell you on a 37-year-old Brook Lopez? Like, I just don't. None of those guys are really moving the needle for me as a starting center. I think Williams, like, there's a lot of risk there. I'm not denying that. I think all the other alternatives have the risk of just like not being good enough, where if Williams can stay healthy for 55, 60 games and play to the level that he's capable of playing to, like, I think that's much more of an impact player than some of these other options. I
do like Cornett. He was one of the better pick and roll bigs in the league last year. And I think that would be one of the things that you would carry over to Luka. But yeah, getting Time Lord at a lower price is something that, and by the way, the Lakers are gonna, like, they really have to get creative this way. They are going to have to, take some swings on some buy low guys, whether it's with their veteran minimum contracts, their TPMLE, whoever they trade for potentially. Like, there is no perfect solution here, and whoever the Lakers get is going to have to play above their head. And in this case, we know what Robert Williams is capable of when he's healthy. It's just keeping him healthy has been the problem. So, I get it. I like the idea of it. If they do this, and this is something they should do regardless, but if they do this, the Lakers should really consider breaking the bank and going out and hiring themselves an elite medical staff and training staff and all of that stuff. That kind of internal investment. That's how the Dodgers have been able to turn Max Muncy into the player he became. You can go through the list. Blake Trinan was another guy like that. And when you make that kind of internal investment on stuff that doesn't count against the cap, that allows you to more confidently make those buy low swings and have them pay off more frequently.
Agreed. Let's get into some fake trades and then let's get out of here. Next question from at Martin Lopez 4545. We have a 3-team trade between the Lakers, the Heat, and the Nets. Lakers get Nic Claxton and Andrew Wiggins. The Heat get Rui Hachimura, Gabe Vincent. The Lakers' second-round pick, which I will note is this year's second-round pick, so it's number 55 pick. I wouldn't say entirely worthless, but as close to worthless as a pick gets. Then the Lakers' 2028 pick swap. The Nets get Maxi Kleber, Jared Vanderbilt, Dalton Knecht. The Lakers first, I'm going to assume 2031, and then a 2030 pick swap from the Lakers. So we have a 3-team trade where, for obviously we're going to primarily look at this from the Lakers perspective, but we will look at it from all perspectives. Lakers are getting Nic Claxton and Andrew Wiggins. They're getting their starting center and their starting 3-and-D wing, but they are sending out Rui, Gabe, Maxi, Vando, and Dalton, as well as their first. And I'm like, pick swaps, I think it just depends on, we don't know where all these teams are going to be at the end of the decade. So it could be valuable pick swaps, could not be. I tend to err on the side of them probably not being valuable because LA will have Luka. And then the second, again, I think is basically just, optics, throwing it in to make the trade look better. But do all three teams say yes to this? Does one team say no? Like, how do you view it?
If there's a team that I would say might not be as interested, it would be Brooklyn, because Jared Vanderbilt's contract is one of the more negative assets out there, frankly. It is crazy how far out that thing goes. Like, it's for another 3 years, I think, after this one. So it's like it's a tough contract. So I don't think the Nets would be interested in taking on Vando. If you can get to the number that you need to get to without including Vando, which I don't think you can off the top of my head, you might have to. Basically, what I'm saying is the Lakers would probably have to throw another pick swap out there, or they would not be able to protect the first that they sent to Brooklyn in that case, because Claxton is somebody who is going to have a lot of value around the league, and if you're going to send out Claxton and then get back one of the worst contracts in the sport, then you really have to get paid for it.
Yeah, I'm looking up. I think that the Lakers get the two best players in the deal, and they plug both of their starting holes with, I would contend, probably the two best realistic targets that are out there. So I think the Lakers probably do this. You are emptying the cupboard with your assets, with multiple expirings, Dalton, the first, a couple of pick swaps. Like, you're really going for it. But I think you look at the updated rotation as Claxton, LeBron, Wiggins, Austin, and Luka as a starting group, which I really like. Yeah. You got way more athleticism, rebounding, defense, length in that starting group. And then your bench is tentatively
Dorian,
DFS, Jordan Goodwin. You do have the 5.7 tax million exception, so you can, can you go get another center? Can you go get, like, you need a high, like, you need a seventh or eighth type guy at least to go get with that, and then you're armed. Like, I think your minimums become very valuable at that point in terms of like, you can offer, hey, come be like the eighth man as a minimum guy and get this spotlight that you might not get in a different situation. So I think the Lakers would strongly consider this. I think Miami potentially does this. You are getting off of Wiggins' contract the extra year, so you're shedding some salary. I don't view the second again as much, if anything. The pick swap is interesting, but it's a 2028 pick swap, so like,
they're going to be good.
I'd almost want the further out pick swaps if I'm Miami or Brooklyn. And then again, you're getting off Wiggins' contract, so maybe you could talk yourself into, if you're Miami, let's be players in 2026 and see if we can get someone that summer. It's going to be a big offseason for a lot of teams. And then the Nets, I'm with you. I think the thing I wrote down is I don't like the Vando portion of this. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it's the worst contract or one of the worst in the league, but I think it is a bad contract, and I think teams would have hesitation to take that on, and they'd probably want something else. Although, I mean, they're getting a first and DK for Claxton, so it's like, and a swap. Like, I don't know. I think this is I think all three teams trade. At least consider this. Yeah. I think it's for 3-team fake trade standards. I think it's pretty good.
I think so too. One thing that I would ask for and make sure I'm getting from Miami, am I getting the Andrew Wiggins who plays against LeBron all the time? But like, how would that go with them being teammates? But yeah, I outside of that, I think it's a fun. It's one of the better 3-team fake trades I've seen.
I just pulled up Wiggins' basketball reference page, and last year, 18 points a game, 37.5% 3-point shooting. We know what he does as a defender. The rebounding could be better, but we now have about a 5-year sample of him being an above average 3-point shooter, which I think is what you need around Luka, LeBron, and Austin. And then we know he's a multi-positional defender, especially at the 2 and the 3. I think rebounding becomes a little less important if you are playing, like if LeBron really is playing the 4 and you have a real 5. Rebounding is still important, of course, but like Wiggins as a 2 or a 3, I think he's a fine rebounder. At that position, it's like if you're going smaller and you're playing him at the 4, that's where it becomes maybe more of an issue. But let's hit the next one.
Luka's a great defender or a great rebounder by point guard standards. So
next one from at John Liu 21. This is another trade. This is between the Lakers and the Jazz. Lakers get Walker Kessler, Colin Sexton, and 2 seconds. The years are unspecified. And the Jazz get Austin Reaves, Dalton Knecht, Maxi Kleba. Lakers remove the 2027 protections on the pick that they owe Utah. It's top 4 protected. And the Lakers also send out a 2028 pick swap. So LA keeps the Rui contract, the Gabe contract. They keep their first round pick, and then they get Kessler, Sexton, and 2 seconds. Follows up with, is this a case like you were saying where both teams feel like they could get more? Also with their expiring deals, picks, and DK, do you see the Lakers making 2 trades or 1? And if it's 2, is it 1 for a center and 1 for a wing? So a few questions here, but what do you think of that trade? And then do you think both sides would ask for more, hypothetically, with how the Lakers view Austin and the Jazz view Kessler? And then with the Lakers' primary assets of expirings, the 1 pick and the swaps and Dalton, do you see them doing 1 trade or 2 trades?
So I don't think the Lakers would do this one.
I agree.
I just don't think Kessler is enough to get back for Austin in the Lakers' eyes. And the other complicating factor here with Kessler that I bring up every time I'm asked about him is the Jazz view trading Kessler to the Lakers as making their own draft capital worse long term, because you are giving Luka a really, really, really good center next to him who would, keep the Lakers from completely ever basically bottoming out unless one or both of those guys get hurt. So, I just don't see the 2 teams coming to agreement on a trade for him specifically. Now, one of the guys that I had mentioned to me in passing, remove Austin from this trade. I don't think that's going to happen. But one of the guys that I had mentioned to me as an interesting name from Utah is actually John Collins, who was way younger than you think. I was shocked. He's 27. I felt like he's been in the league forever. But he is a pretty good fly. I could see John Collins wherever he goes next, because I think he's going to get traded this summer. Wherever he goes next, we're going to be sitting there saying like, dang, he only went for that. Because he's a decent floor spacer. He's super athletic, so he can get above the rim, which is really important on a Luka team. And he is not as bad defensively as I think he is kind of painted to be. He's been in some rough situations over the years where before he was playing with Trae Young, which I think is a really bad guard to have on a John Collins team. And then he goes to Utah, who've been trying to lose basically since he got there. So
blatantly trying to lose.
It's like
basically throwing games.
It was the weirdest thing when Utah dropped in the lottery. It was super crazy. It was a hot mic moment. Adam Silver was like, "Ha, see, that's what you." but no, it was. I think that John Collins is an interesting name. Now he does make $26 million, which is kind of difficult to trade for. But he's somebody who I think I've spent a weird amount of time putting him into hypothetical trades. So I don't see this happening necessarily because I think I think actually John mentions this where both teams would be kind of annoyed at the return they got for the trade. So I don't necessarily see it, but if you're looking at Utah guys to maybe keep an eye on, I think John Collins is a really interesting one.
My Collins pushback would just be that I think he's a bit of a tweener positionally on the defensive side. Like he's kind of a 4.5 and it's just, so if you're sending out, I mean, if you're keeping Rui, now all of a sudden you're creating even more of a logjam hypothetically. But if you're sending Rui out, it's like, I think he's a better Rui. They're different. They're not the same, but like they're similar in terms of their position. So he's a better rebounder. He's more athletic. He's a better finisher. I think he's just a better pure bucket getter. Can play the center more, center spot more naturally. But I just think he's still going to conflict or overlap with LeBron, Luka, and DFS to some extent. That I think they're pretty like I would almost say that barring Giannis or some player of that ilk or some of the other guys we talked about, Triple J, Chet, whatever, and those guys could play center too. But like barring someone like that becoming available, I almost think like they're set at power forward defensively between Luka, LeBron, and DFS. And you even have Vando who could scale up or however you want to put it. Like he's a power forward / center offensively. He's a wing defensively. He could play the 4 if you need him to. So I don't think they need to be adding any more defensive 4s to the roster. I think it needs to be center, wing, or guard. And those are the 4. And I don't think, but I'm with you in that like if Collins he's not as good as Aaron Gordon, but could he have like 75%, 80% of the impact that Aaron Gordon has had in a particular situation where you have a really good defensive center, where you have good defensive personnel on the perimeter, and he's like your worst defender, but he's not bad enough to like sink your defense. I could see him like going to a playoff team and having a real impact. I don't know. I think for the Lakers, it's like, this is more of a, if LeBron retires or leaves and you need a 4, that's a different conversation where he has the higher upside than like a Rui or a DFS. I just think as constructed, they don't need another power forward. Yeah,
it was more kind of like a consolidation deal. I kind of wonder if Dorian opts in, whether the Lakers maybe look to flip him and like him and Rui. I know that he's really close with Luka, and the Lakers are trying to get Luka to sign that dotted line this summer. So I think chances are, like 85, 90% chance that Dorian is back with the Lakers next year in some capacity. But, if you look at avenues or types of moves, I don't know. I just like, it's kind of the Obi Toppin conversation with Rui too. We were having this in the lounge Discord where, I don't think Toppin is that much better, if a better player than Rui at all. I just think his skill set
Rui's better.
Is more,
but
what's
the
that?
Skill set, yeah. I think Rui's better.
Yeah, but I think Toppin's skill set is more practical in that he has a quicker release. He can actually get way up above the rim. And I think Rui is, like, even if you want to argue that he's a more talented player, he would have a higher 2K rating or something like that. I think Toppin's skill set and specifically getting up above the rim, that's the thing that honestly, like the Lakers need a wow dunk guy next year, where they go up and they get a dunk and the crowd goes like, how did he get up there? Because those are the guys that completely stretches a defense vertically when you have Luka on the court too. And Austin and LeBron for that matter. Those guys get better too when you have that center on the court.
Well, I mean, I would say, I guess Jackson was that guy. He had a couple wild dunks, but again, he but it was like not sustainable.
Wow, I didn't know he was coordinated to do that. Like that was
Hey, he had a East Bay funk dunk a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But no, I get what you're saying. Quickly, two things quickly. One, I'm going to apologize to Aaron Gordon because I don't know if John Collins could actually be like 75% of Aaron Gordon. That might be disrespectful to how good Aaron Gordon is. I think he was Denver's second best player in the playoffs. So I'll say 75% is maybe being a little generous. Second thing, in terms of how many trades they will make, I think you got to set the over-under at 1.5. I would lean a slight under. I would say if I was pegging to the decimal, I would go 1.4. So slightly under the 1.5. Oh, obviously you can't do 1.4 trades, but like I think the Lakers make a trade. I don't know if they make two. Again, I think there's some lack of certainty right now or clarity with are they putting I think they'd put the pick on the table for the right deal, but how high is that bar? And again, can they get the center or the wing with one set of their assets and do they just try to get the other one with the 5.7 tax MLE? So I think right now I would lean more toward one, but I think it is pretty close and I wouldn't be surprised if they made two.
Yeah. The biggest question is whether they combine Rui and or the pick or Dalton and or the pick. And once they make the one trade, because look, Rui has some fans in the organization. They love Rui. And I think he's a win
for them.
What's that?
He's a win for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
They uncovered him and unlocked his potential.
And on top of it, he was the only guy who played with any kind of force in that as that series went along. I thought he woke up the team with that left-handed dunk he had on Gobert in Game 5. That was heading towards a blowout early, and he had that dunk, and I thought it woke up the building. I thought it woke up the team. Not saying that the Lakers wouldn't trade a guy because he had one dunk on Rudy Gobert, but I guess I just more mean that he is more popular than I think a lot of people kind of consider. I don't think he's, obviously it would take more for the Lakers to trade Austin Reaves, but the Lakers consider Rui a core part of their roster. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with it. I'm saying that's how they feel about the guy. So whatever player they trade Rui for will have to be considered immediately a core part of the roster.
Last one here before we wrap up from Jordan09312. Have you thought about the draft at all? And what do you think the best path would be for the Lakers? Should they trade up? And what type of player would you prioritize? Also, what do you think about Highsmith from the Heat as a target? And what do you think it'd take to get him? He's a 40% shooter. And his B-ball index defensive metrics are some of the best in the league, all while making around $5 million. I think he could fit into the 3 spot instead of Rui. So a couple questions there. One about the draft and potentially trading up and prioritizing a certain type of player. And then Highsmith and his potential cost.
I think it would be pretty difficult for the Lakers to approach Luka this offseason and say, hey, we're trying to win now. Also, we gave up what few assets we have to get into the draft. I just think that I don't necessarily see that happening. And Highsmith, I just found out, is 28. That I feel like he's been in the league 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons. I just started thinking about him like last year or the year before. So it's just funny how we do this with players where John Collins, I feel like, has been in the league forever, and I was shocked to find out he was 27. Highsmith, I feel like it just got into the league basically, or it became a name that I was more aware of, and he's already 28 years old. So I guess I kind of see it. I guess I kind of like it, but he's one of those, like the Lakers need more guys who are 2/3s than 3/4s, and he's more of the latter.
Yeah, so I'll be fully transparent here. I have not paid attention to the draft.
I Googled
just because. I've been watching the finals. My son's out here. Been spending time with him, trying to be off the grid when I'm not podcasting. I haven't really been locked into the draft. Also, I think the biggest reason I haven't been locked into the draft is because Lakers don't have a first round pick. So I'm operating under the assumption that they are not going to have a first round pick on the 25th, and maybe. So I'll say like the Lakers are always sniffing around late first, early second, early to mid second. So I wouldn't be surprised if they purchase a pick, and now that requires them spending money, and that's a factor that that they have to weigh. But I think maybe an early to mid second round pick, if someone slips that they like, I could see that as a possibility. I think late first is more expensive and a little bit trickier. You have to give a guaranteed contract at that point, and I think that they got to be careful with how they build the roster, how they approach this. So if it's as simple as just buying a pick, I think that should be something they consider. Obviously, if you're trying to put in assets in a trade for a pick, then that's where it gets a little dicey, because it's like you should be trading for win now players, or at least guys who can help you now and also grow with Luka and Austin. In terms of Highsmith, I really like him. I'm really high on him. I think he's someone that can be a top 8, top 9 player, which especially on that contract, $5 million expiring. The issue is the Lakers are in this in-between zone with their assets where, I mean, like, would you trade Dalton for him? Like Dalton plus Shake's contract. I mean, like, I think Highsmith is better than Dalton right now, and will probably be better than Dalton for the next couple of years at least. But Dalton could easily be better than him like 3 years from now, and I don't know if he's good enough to be worth that risk.
Yeah.
Again, he's an expiring contract due for a raise. I think he's going to be a guy who's maybe not quite full non-taxpayer MLE, but in between taxpayer and non-taxpayer, kind of that gray area. But the Lakers just are in a weird spot with their assets where, like, trading for a ninth man, they don't have, like, it'd be, if you had I don't know, maybe it is Dalton, but it's like Dalton and a second, or a real second. That's where you have a little bit more flexibility to play with. But they're either like trade the first, which that's a gross overpay for Highsmith in my opinion, or it's like you just don't really have anything else to put in the deal. Like, they're very limited pick swaps, because again, they got the 5 pick swaps, but those pick swaps, if I'm thinking about acquiring that, I'm just looking at, they're gonna have Luka, they're gonna get that second superstar at some point over the second half of the decade. I'm not betting on that pick swap ever coming to fruition.
Yeah, Highsmith is the kind of guy, a team that has been better with their assets goes out and gets to fortify whatever their major move is this summer. And the Lakers, frankly, just haven't been good enough with a lot of their asset management to be able to go out and get themselves a Haywood Highsmith. I also do like him, and I know Heat fans really kind of like him. I'm also good on acquiring Miami Heat players for a little while. I think I'm all right for at least a little bit.
There's some exceptions. Khalil Ware, I think you should welcome him on the Lakers.
That's actually part of like the Wiggins thing from earlier. That I'm like, I don't know. Like, none didn't go very well. Gabe has been up and down, mostly down.
How about they have to be above 6'3"? That's fine. Is that a good requirement? Well, I think.
Can I ask you one? Go ahead. I got this question, and I meant to ask you this. Actually, I meant to text you, but I forgot. But say that the Mavericks call and they say, "Hey, Austin Reaves for Derek Lively." How do you? What would you do there? How do you think that goes?
This is one that I got floated in a live earlier in the week, and so it was actually Lively and Max for Austin. Which,
well, in that case, yeah,
I don't. Yeah, I think in that case you do that. I don't think Dallas does. I don't think Dallas would do that. I think if I'm Dallas, I probably would not do that. I think Gafford's the guy that he's going to be due for an extension or a new contract soon. Lively is still team friendly, rookie scale deal. He's going to be cost controlled relatively for the next 4 or 5 years. So I think Lively is the higher upside player. I've compared him to that Tyson Chandler, DeAndre Jordan mold from early to mid 2010s, where I mean those guys around that time were in the mix for Defensive Player of the Year. I mean Chandler won Defensive Player of the Year. He was also the starting center on a title team, but those guys made all-star teams. They played on the Olympic teams. So like I think Lively, that's his upside, that's his ceiling. And as we've seen, just like if you can get a really good center, like if at some point Derek Lively was the 5th best center in the NBA, I would not be like shocked.
Yeah.
I think again, that's more of the 90 to 95th, 99th percentile of his trajectory, but I think he's really good. And I thought he was really, especially for a rookie during a finals run, he showed a lot, in my opinion, that the defensive versatility, the rim running, the finishing, the rebounding, all that stuff. Like I think he's a really, really good prospect. I know had a bit of a down year, but they also were starting Najee Marshall at point guard for like half the season. So I'm going to give him a little bit of grace there. I mean, I guess the person to really answer this is Luka and what Luka thinks about this, because he's played with both guys. I would put Lively in that mix. I don't think he's right now at the top 50 mix of guys, but he is a center. He is athletic. He is, I think, proven relatively through his first couple seasons. So I think it is more of a future move than a present move, but I think I would strongly consider it. Yeah. I mean, I would probably do it, I would say.
Yeah. If it's Lively and Max, I'd do it without hesitation. Yeah. Lively alone for Reaves is, man, it's a fascinating trade, because you're right. You're trading, if you're Dallas, you're trading somebody who absolutely fits Cooper Flagg's timeline, and somebody who can play with AD or without AD, and if they continue to employ AD, I don't know. But you also desperately need ball handling, and the concern there would eventually be Austin and Kyrie in the same backcourt defensively. How does that look? But yeah, it's a really, really interesting one.
Interesting one. I don't think Dallas does it for the record.
Yeah, I don't think it's
I don't know if the Lakers do
either.
I think it depends how high you are in Lively.
Yeah,
to some extent.
Aaron, our buddy Aaron Larsoul, makes this point all the time, that there is such a thing as a trade both teams say no to. And I think this is one of those kinds of trades where I think both teams just say, yeah, technically checks boxes. It would be really interesting, but no. And I think that's where the conversation would kind of end.
It's an interesting one. But I think if I'm Dallas, it's Cooper Flagg number 1, far and away. That's the asset that's the untouchable asset for me, that I'm not entertaining trading the number 1 pick. I'm not like, that's the dude, that's your franchise guy for the next 15 years, potentially. I would actually put Lively number 2. I think that's the guy that above AD, above Kyrie, above Gafford. I think there's a gap there, despite like the per possession, per minute numbers being relatively similar. I think you're factoring the age, just again, what he showed me during that finals run. I think that's a dude that I would not be surprised if he is a future all-star, future, maybe not all NBA guy, but future, maybe all defense guy, future DPOY ballot guy, maybe even an Olympian at some point. Like I think he's in that conversation. So Austin is too for what's not the all defense stuff, but like I think we'll see. I don't think Dallas does that.
Olympic
I don't think. Well, yeah, it was on 2023, but I think this is a good place to wrap, though. We're said we'd go 45 minutes, and we've gone nearly double that. So that's par for the course when we link up. But Anthony, outside of Lakers Lounge and checking you out on Clutch Points, anything else you want to plug?
Our new show that we're all working on, which we're all really excited about. Great Western Forum. It's going to be you. It's going to be Pete. It's going to be myself. Plus, it's the forum is there for a reason. It's going to be a revolving group of guests, whether it's a single guest at any given time or a group of your favorite Lakers content creators in a different segment. We've already started planning the show. We have a logo, we have intro, outro music, and the day after the draft is at least tentatively scheduled to be our first episode when that drops. So I very few projects have had me more excited than this one.
Very excited to chop it up with you and Pete on we're still figuring out the cadence, if it's going to be once a month, once every couple, 2-3 weeks, whatever. But I think it's going to be really fun. And just had Pete on last week, you on this week, and able to plug it. And I already had people reaching out last week from that conversation at the end of talking about it, and people being excited to listen to us. So I think people are really going to enjoy that. So make sure you check out the Great Western Forum. Tentatively the day after the draft, but of course we'll be plugging it on here. We'll be plugging it on Lakers Lounge and Laker Film Room and everywhere. But that will do it for today's show. Thank you so much, Anthony, for popping on and going so long with me, as we tend to do on Buha's blog. But thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I will potentially be back tomorrow, if not on Monday, with part 2 of the mailbag. I got over 20 questions, so wanted to split it up and do more of the trade off-season focused questions with Anthony, and then do some of the wackier ones solo. So I will either have part 2 coming on Friday or on Monday. If I don't have it Friday, I'll be doing a live on Friday. So either way, I'll talk to you all tomorrow.